Hello YouTube, and welcome to this ultimate triceps exercises tier list. You guys seem to really enjoy the previous installment, and therefore, I've decided to come up with a new one as soon as possible. I asked you guys which muscle group you wanted to see next, and it was very close between lats and triceps, but ultimately triceps won. And that works out perfectly for me because it gives me a logical continuation to the bicep tier list I made last week that you can find in the description if you missed it. So we're going to function the same way I did, meaning that we're going to keep the same tiers with just some modifications in terms of the names I chose, and it's going to be the same idea. I'm going to rank lifts, 30 lifts, and a little bit more than 30 this time, that I selected, I tried myself, and I'm going to tell you guys what I think about them, which ones I think are really bad, which are really good, to give you a good idea of what is going to help you in your program to get bigger arms. So, in terms of tiers selected this time, same logic, it's from S to D, but the D tier in this case is called the Toothpick-tier. What I call the Toothpick-tier is the tier where I'm going to put all of the lifts that, in my opinion, if you do hoping to get big triceps, you're going to get hugely disappointed because they tend to be dangerous for the elbow. They tend to be very prone to giving tendinitis, or they don't really work the tricep as much as you think it does. All things that ultimately mean they're bad exercises and you would be better off doing something else. Then we have the mediocre tier. This is for the ones that I find reasons and logical explanations to tell you guys why I think that there are better options out there, but they're not technically horrible. So if you have an emotional connection to them, or if you like the feel, you can still do them, but they're still a waste of time. Then we have the decent tier. This is for lifts I have nothing for or against. They're just decent. You can always do something better, but they're not going to be dangerous or to be a waste of time. Then there is the excellent tier when you start getting into exercises that I do myself or I tend to program for you guys because I think that this is the cream of the crop. This is when we start talking about things that will really create huge and freaky triceps. And then at the very top, there is the S tier, the mythical tier, where I put all of the top exercises. All of the stuff that if you are not doing, in my opinion, you're wasting your time because these are divine exercises for the triceps. They work the three heads exactly the way they're supposed to be worked. They're low on fatigue for the elbow. They can be spammed. They're fun to do. They're easy to set up, and pretty much anyone can do them. And for those of you who have actually taken a look at the thumbnail, the reason why it's called the mythical tier is because Lee Priest, the tricep guy that is smiling in the thumbnail, was nicknamed the Blonde Myth. So let's get us started right away with a lift that I have promoted on the channel in the past, and that is the French press. The French press, unlike what some of you might think, is going to go in the excellent tier, not the mythical tier, because it can be a little bit taxing on the elbows, to be honest with you guys. If you run it for too long and you go heavy every single time to failure, you are going to start developing tendinitis. It's sort of inevitable. It's the nature of the beast. On top of that, the position is not the most comfortable. You will find that the dumbbell has a tendency to run in the back of your head, and that doesn't feel good at all. And so it's something that can be best replaced by another option I will be presenting to you guys very soon. But it's still great. Don't listen to people who tell you that the position of the shoulder is dangerous. No, it's not. It's just that it's not the best long term. However, if you have an incline bench or something you can put your back against for this exercise, it actually transforms into a mythical tier exercise. So instead of being completely straight like this, if you have something you can put your back against to be a little bit inclined like this, and you do the movement in this arc and this range of motion, so instead of being here, you're going to be slightly here. Now there's something much better happening, and that is that the angle of the elbow and also the trajectory of the dumbbell both make it so that the exercise is much more comfortable and also hit the triceps in a different fashion that tends to alleviate tendinitis. So if you have that type of equipment in your gym, which usually you have, if you have an incline bench, you should be fine, you can actually run the French press with a dumbbell. But if you don't, or if you would prefer to do something else, but still stay in the same range of motion and the same movement pattern, you can try the next exercise I'm putting in mythical tier, and that is the overhead cable extension. It's the same movement pattern, it works the tricep in a similar fashion, but all of the issues of the dumbbell French press are pretty much erased. The cable is not going to run into the back of your head. It gives less tendonitis because there's no rebound at the bottom. The shoulders don't have to get into any weird positions at the top when you're supposed to press up with the dumbbell because the cable can split in both directions so both arms can follow it. Feels much more natural on the tricep. This is a mythical tier exercise for a reason. You can literally pick that exercise and progress on it for 2 years and get gigantic long head of the triceps just from that. You're not going to get any issues or problems, so I really recommend that movement. Then we have the first of many controversial entries on this tier list, and that is the close grip bench. That is beloved by many because they think that it's going to give them big triceps, and I think that this is a big mistake. The close grip bench is not a bad exercise. I'm actually going to place it in the decent tier, but for a triceps tier list, I cannot put it any higher. Why? Because if you pick that exercise and you only do that for triceps, you will progress, sure, but at the end of the day, your results will be extremely disappointing. Very few people can get big triceps from close grip bench alone, and those that can are usually freaks or people with a specific disposition to triceps growth. For you, it's not a good idea to only stick with it. But if you want a compound movement to target the tricep in particular, this is the best of the horizontal presses for that. But it's not enough. That is what I want to actually convey for you guys. So it ranks B tier. And the next movement, the diamond push-up, is sort of in the same vein. I love diamond push-ups, but they're not enough for triceps. It's a great way to do a push-up from the floor that is going to emphasize the tricep in particular, but you still work shoulders and chest as you do it, just like with a close grip bench. This is something that is going to be redundant in the tier list. Compound movements scarcely rank above B, and they are rarely mythical because a compound movement, by definition, is going to prioritize the muscle groups that are the strongest in the movement, and it's usually never triceps. In a close grip bench, even though you might think the tricep is going to be the limiting factor because of the grip, it rarely is. It tends to be shoulder and it tends to be chest. It's the same for the tricep, the diamond push-up. So again, B tier, good movement, but don't expect massive triceps from it. Also because you will find that exercises that rank really high for triceps tend to be the ones that work the long portion of the tricep, the long head of the tricep, because this is where the meat is, and most presses don't actually work that portion enough. Next, we have one that many people really dislike, and I don't really understand why, and that is the reverse extension. So the technical name is the underhand cable pushdowns. For some people, for some reason, if you go from this grip to this grip, it kills the movement. I personally don't agree with that at all. It's just that it's a different grip. It is true, however, that it's very easy to fatigue on that movement, meaning that when you grab supinated like this, at some point your wrist is going to give. So if your weight selection is poor, your wrist is going to be the limiting factor, which is not the point. This is why it's not mythical tier, it's because other extensions with cables are better for the lateral portions of the tricep. But it's still a great movement, and especially if you let the shoulder actually fly free. So something I recommend is try doing that movement and try actually letting the arm raise as you extend and then go up like this. And you will find that it activates the long head of the tricep plenty. It also feels tremendous. Actually give it a try. Then we have another classic, another staple of tricep development in the presence of the easy bar skull crusher, one that will also land itself in B tier. Now, this one in particular is the real skull crusher, where the bar ends here at the end of the movement. I find this one to be very overhyped and very overrated by people, be it strict or being with a cheat form where you do a half pullover, half skull crusher, because one, probably the worst movement for the tricep tendonitis development, this will give you golfer's elbows. Most people get golfer's elbows from that movement in particular, and it's because of a simple reason. Look at the position of the elbow in relation to the arm, and you will quickly understand that at the bottom of the movement, there is a ton of tension on the elbow tendon. So it's only natural that you would develop tendonitis. It's not something that makes it a bad lift, but it also means that it's very hard to progress on skull crushers because you constantly get impeded by this very problem. There are much better ways to do a very similar movement for the long head of the tricep that is going to give you a better recruitment. But since it's a classic lift,
and it's everywhere on YouTube. People still do that in that fashion, and in my opinion, it's a form of dogmatism, and it's not the way to think about it. So B tier. Then we have the first exercise that is going to land itself in Toothpick-tier, and that is the lying cross-face extension. You rarely see that movement for a reason. It's because it's absolutely total garbage. So for those of you who don't know which one it is, it's one where you lay on your back like this, and you're going to let the hand extend in that fashion, and this is the movement for the tricep. Of course, I'm supposed to be lying down directly, but just looking at someone do that exercise, you should be able to tell exactly why it's a bad movement for the tricep. It's because you want to have maximum extension and maximum flexion of the tricep. The extension is there, but the flexion is completely limited by your own body, because the dumbbell is going to run into your own body times and times again, when the arm could actually go much deeper and involve more long head of the tricep. On top of that, you're doing that again in the same fashion you would do an easy bar skull crusher, meaning that it has a high potential of developing tendonitis. It's something that is not comfortable at all, because good luck grabbing a dumbbell in that position and doing this. You're not going to be able to go very heavy, because in this case, the force is going to be directly here, and you're quickly going to find that it's not comfortable, and that your grip, just like in the underhand tricep extension, might become a limiting factor. So all in all, it's all of the bad things all put together for one shitty tricep exercise. I really recommend you guys dodge it. I'm sure that almost none of you guys are actually doing it, because it's very rare. But if by any chance some schmuck on Instagram starts promoting it, you will already know that this is a Toothpick-tier exercise. Then we have the standing easy bar extension. So this one is one I used to do, and it's not horrible. But when you see all of the good alternatives that you have to be able to actually control the weight, focus on the stretch of the tricep, and make a clear and strict, clean gesture and movement with that bar in particular, there's not really a reason to do this one. I'm not going to put it in mediocre tier, because I don't think it belongs there, although one could make a case for it, because I've found, and this is something that I've done myself, that many people like this exercise because they can move a shit ton of weight with it. Like, compare how much you can do laying on your back on the skull crusher and how much you can do standing up. You can almost double the weight, and that's for a reason. Is because you use a ton of shoulders in that movement. It's almost a press. So it goes. I was going to put it in decent tier, but the more I talk about it, the more I think it's mediocre. I think it belongs in mediocre tier. I'm switching my my judgment on this one. On top of that, tendonitis galore on this, because just like with the French press, you're going to want to rebound, but in the difference of the French press in this position, one, you're going to move much more weight. Two, it's going to be with an easy bar, so there's going to be also a tendency to place the elbow in a position that might make it so that when it rebounds, you are actually compromised, in the sense that the long head of the tricep might not work as much as you will think it does. On top of that, the grip and the discomfort on the wrist can be pretty immense. It can actually be discomfortable for the shoulders. It is bad, okay? If you really want to do an extension with an easy bar, you can find many ways to do it without actually having to stand up with it. Of course, I'm sure that many of you guys love to move 45s on each side of the bar with an easy bar on this exercise, just like I used to do. I personally finally gave up on it after realizing that I was just ego lifting. That's actually the exact definition of what ego lifting is. It's using too much weight for an exercise, even though you know you are not getting enough stimulus, or actually enough stimulus to justify the weight you're using. Then we have the cable skull crusher that, unlike the easy bar version, lands itself in the excellent tier, because a ton of the issues of the easy bar version are actually corrected by the cable. First and foremost, the fact that you can go deeper, because the bar is not going to actually run into your forehead, so you can actually allow for more flexion of the elbow. You can recruit more long head. And on top of that, the squeeze at the top is going to be more controlled. The weight is going to be behind you as opposed to straight above you. And that makes all of the difference when we talk about tendonitis, because now the weight is not resting on the stacked tendons and joints, it is actually behind. So not only is there more tension at the top, but it's good tension for the tricep musculature and not for the structure. So all in all, excellent. The reason why it does not land itself in the mythical tier is because there are better exercises with cables that replicate a similar pattern for the tricep, but that are actually better. And I would actually warn you guys that this movement, also because it resembles a press in the sense that you have your shoulders that are not fully extended behind you. You also have a tendency to use way too much weight on it. I actually knew two guys who tore a tricep, and they were both natural using that exercise. It's because you can move the entire stack, and of course you get excited, so you want to move more and more. But because of the nature of the movement,
when something gives, that something tends to be the tricep. So be very careful with that. Next, we have a movement that powerlifters actually do, and that for once is great, meaning that it's not total garbage, and that is the GM press. The GM press also belongs in the excellent tier. It's an hybrid between a skull crusher and a close grip. You could tell me, okay, well, these movements that you just described both landed in decent tier. So how give that now they're in excellent tier? Well, I think it's because the GM press takes the best portions of each lift and it mixes them together. So this is actually a compound movement you're going to be able to use to also build the long head of the tricep while also having some carryover to your presses. This is why it's in A. Does it compare in terms of long head activation to something like a French press, for example? Not necessarily because of the position of the shoulder, but it gives you a ton at once. It gives you much more tricep development, for example, than a standard and normal close grip bench. So it's something I recommend you do. And if you actually do try it, please try with baby weight because you will find that it takes some time to adapt to the form and you do not want to get injured on this. It would be way too stupid. But for all of my brothers out there who really love compound movements, actually this is a good alternative to some more isolation type stuff for the tricep. And talking about isolation type stuff, we have the time-tested and the true V-bar pushdown. That lands in Mythical-tier. It's standard, it's nothing new, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. It's an extension for the tricep where you're going to be able to use a lot of weight that is going to be safe, give you a good squeeze, but also work that pushing power that is going to make it so that you can use a lot of weight safely. There is a reason why this is still a standard to this day, is because it is actually great. So if we're going to discuss extensions with cables in particular, this is one that I think is excellent. Now, you will find in this situation that many people tell you that because the shoulders are stacked and they're not actually moving, you don't get as much long head activation as one might think. This is not technically untrue because this is a push down, but don't let words fool you. Just because something is not an extension with shoulder flexion does not mean that the long head is not recruited at all. And therefore, even with push downs, you're going to get some work for the long head. But it might not be enough. This is why this tier list is important. It's going to give you the best exercise for everything. For the lateral head of the tricep in particular, this exercise is going to be what you want to go with. Next up, we have the cable rear drive. This one, just by name, is not going to ring a bell, but the second you see the little guy doing the movement, it's going to immediately appear evident what I'm talking about here. I actually greatly like this movement. It is doable with bands, it is doable with cables. You do it once at one part of the body at a time, one arm at a time. The reason why it's not in mythical tier is because you also use a lot of the musculature of the upper body, which is not technically a bad thing, but it has also a tendency to transform into a more cheaty movement, which is great because it means that when you get to failure, you can cheat and get additional reps for the triceps. It's a great overall movement for the scapular belt as well. So it can't be a mythical tier exercise, but it's a little bit like a GM press. It gives you a lot of stimulus at once, and it's also extremely safe and very low risk of tendonitis as well. Then we have the rope triceps pushdown, and for the same reason I put the V-bar pushdown in mythical tier, this one goes there as well. There's some debate amongst people who say that the strength curve is not good and the position of the elbows at the end of the movement is not what you want. Personally, when I do that movement, it feels tremendous, and that's really all I need to know. As you know, I'm not science-based at all. I base all of the advice I give you guys off of my own experience, and my experience tells me that V-bar pushdowns, rope pushdowns, they both work the same portions of the tricep, but with slight differences, and they're both excellent. You want to run tricep pushdowns in your program, pick these two movements, rotate between the two. You're going to find that the carryover is almost 1-to-1, but that the slight difference in elbow flexion and also in elbow angle at the end of the movement is going to prevent tendonitis from arising. So these two are the twins that end up in the mythical tier. Now we're moving back to compound movements, and this one is the football bar bench, also called the Swiss bar bench. And for the same reason I put the close grip bench in decent tier, this one also goes in decent tier. It puts the shoulder in a position that deloads it a bit, so it's safer on the shoulder. It also forces more tricep activation because your triceps travel much further back when you go down with the movement for a simple reason. If you're like this for normal bench press, you get limited here by your chest because the bar runs into your chest. But if you're here instead, you can drive much deeper because you understand that because of the position of the hands, you're going to be able to actually drive the elbows backward as opposed to having to flare them out like this. This is why many people favor that movement if they want tricep development. It's also a great movement, and I would even go as far as to say that maybe if you do a close grip Swiss bar, we could discuss putting it in excellent tier. I think that that's a reasonable assessment, but if you do a normal grip, it's just decent tier, it's just more emphasis on the shoulder. So again, balance of isolation and compounds on your program for triceps, this is one that you could actually select if you wanted. And speaking of compounds, we have the dips. Now the dips, to me, are mediocre in terms of tricep development. Here we're talking about dips. An actually properly done dip, one when you actually enter a bottle position where your chest is you're going to lean forward and your chest is going to open up, is mainly going to be shoulder and chest. There is going to be some tricep development and some tricep involvement, but not as much as one would think. You will find that this is not the worst compound movement for triceps, but in my opinion, if you hope to develop the musculature of the arm and you only do dips, you're going to be disappointed. You might be someone that your shoulders are going to take over, your chest is going to take over because the movement is designed for that. And so the tricep stimulus is going to be minimal and you're going to be very disappointed. So C tier. Next up, the seated dumbbell extension. This one is also rarely seen, but I think it's a shame because it's an excellent exercise that ranks A tier. And the reason I think most people don't do it is simply because when you are going to sit down to do a movement for the tricep, you immediately think about either single arm extension behind the head or a French press. But this one I think is highly overrated. It's very comfortable on the elbow, very low risk of tendonitis. It's comfortable on the shoulder because you're in a neutral position. If you have something to rest your back against, you're not going to have any issues. And because your hands are like this instead of like this, the dumbbells are not going to run into your head because they're way further back. Now, one thing that prevents this movement from being mythical is that it's going to be tough to use a ton of weight because it's not comfortable to grab a dumbbell like this. It's either that the dumbbell and the plate is going to be flush against your hand and it just hurts, it's not nice to grab onto, or you're going to be grabbing in the middle of the dumbbell and it's going to be hard and now the grip is going to become a factor, and we never want grip to become a factor when we talk about tricep development. If the grip can be a limiting factor, the movement loses points, and this is exactly what happened to this movement. But if you have never tried it, I recommend doing it on an actual incline bench. You'll find that the stretch is actually quite nice. And we have this right there for all of my calisthenics enthusiasts, and that is the triceps bodyweight extension. Many calisthenic athletes swear by that movement and they actually assess it as a great long head of the tricep builder. And that absolutely is a great movement for the long head of the tricep, but it's still only B tier. Why? Because you use your body weight. When you work a muscle as fragile and as delicate as the tricep, that relies a ton on the structure of the elbow, that is, as anyone who has ever lifted weight knows, a bitch when it gets actually inflamed because of tendonitis, you really don't want to use your body weight. Because from one rep to the other, you can go from heaven to hell. You want something controlled. You want something where you don't have to rely on balance. And the issue is that this relies on balance. So if you take someone who's a calisthenic athlete, they can do that safely because they have the technical skills for that. But someone who's a little bit less advanced is not going to be able to benefit as greatly from the movement. So not horrible, a good movement if you end up with only rings and you don't know how to work the long head of the tricep, that will do. But please be very careful when you do that. It's very easy to go into the position where the long head is fully fledged, fully stretched, but then when you reverse it back into the positive, this is when stuff can go really, really wrong. So be careful. And talking about calisthenic movement, bodyweight movements for the triceps, we now have the one movement that any and every novice has done at least once. Like if you've never done that, you're a liar. I remember starting my journey and doing dips on the floor. I didn't even do them on the bench. On the floor, it's even worse, but it doesn't stop that lift from ranking directly Toothpick-tier because it's a horrible way to train triceps. The reason why we all used to train triceps like this is because we didn't have a choice. It's the only thing we knew how to do. It's the one movement where if you don't feel your triceps, you might actually have to go check out with your doctor if your nerve endings are okay, because it's all tricep for the most part, but it doesn't make it a good lift because, one, the position of the hands is just so uncomfortable. Unless you do a full rotation of the wrist and you're like this, you're going to be like this, it's awkward, the wrist falls bad. Then you also have internal rotation of the shoulder, which is not bad. But if you do 1,000,000 reps, because this is a very easy exercise to just pump out, you can actually start to feel some discomfort. You don't really get a good stretch, you don't even really get a good squeeze because you can't go all the way down. Your elbow joint starts to reach your shoulder joint at some point, but you can't go any deeper because, again, of the position of your hips in relation to the bench. It's just a logistical nightmare. And anyone who's done any level of other exercises for the triceps knows, because how many of you who are intermediate still do bench dips? Zero, because you moved on to bigger and better things. So this is absolutely a movement that ends in Toothpick-tier. Then we have the pike push-ups. And the pike push-ups are mediocre. They're simply mediocre because it's a movement for the shoulders. You maximally flare out your elbows so as to recruit as much shoulder as possible. And yes, there is going to be some elbow flexion, so the tricep is recruited, but it's not the main point of the lift. If you want a tricep movement that you can do in the form of a push-up with body weight, stick to diamond push-ups. It is actually much better. Then for this one, we have the dumbbell pullover, and this one might actually be controversial. As you know, I love pullovers. I think that they're great for the lats, and it's actually one of these movements, again, that gives you a ton of stimulus for many areas of the body. It's also great for the chest. For a lot of people like me, I get a crazy chest stretch. But for tricep and long head in particular, it's mediocre. It cannot go higher than this, because the only thing it does is it helps the shoulder go into flexion, and it keeps the arm in position close to the body. So it's good. You get passive stretch, but that's pretty much all you get. It's not enough to justify actually putting it any higher, and it will not build your long head. However, I know that some people, some freaks out there, when they do dumbbell pullover, they only feel the long head of the tricep. If you're like this, you are an anomaly. For most people, it's not that. Maybe you could just stick to that for your long head exercises, but I would still always recommend you do something with some level of elbow flexion or extension. And then we are going to speak about this one that I personally call the rope
Push away. Some people call it an overhead tricep extension. I'm going to use rope push away because it's going to help me differentiate between this right there and this. There's a reason why this one is B tier and this one is mythical, and it's the angle of the torso. When you see someone doing a rope push away, look at them and realize that they are fighting against the stack, because you have created tension to be able to work your tricep by walking away from the stack, but now your torso is parallel with the floor. So to maintain that tension, you have to have a staggered stance. Is that comfortable? No. Is it the best way to work your tricep? Also no. Look at all of the exercises that are up there. They tend to be very comfortable exercises. If it's stuff that has you do something a little bit too acrobatic, it immediately loses points. It's a little bit rough to put it in B tier because it's still great for the long head, but when you compare the other options that you can do with a cable stack, why would you do it like this? There's absolutely no point. And even if you told me that this torso angle in particular is excellent for the tricep, I have a better alternative that is going to come very soon. So this one is decent tier. There are better ways to actually do that movement. After this, we have the kneeling cable tricep extension. So I surprise myself every day I wake up because I put the exercise that I wanted to discuss right afterwards. It's almost as if I actually planned this tier list and just forgot about it. So this is the one I'm speaking about. If you want that torso angle, this is it. Do it kneeling. Do it on a pad. Do it with your elbows on a bench. It's much better because you don't have to create tension by moving away from the stack, and you don't have to maintain that tension. The tension is simply created by the movement of the tricep, meaning also that you're going to be able to use less weight for better results. Now, the one problem with this is that you're going to have to find the position that suits you best, and it might actually take a while. You're going to have to calculate the distance between the bench and the cable, how you're going to put your knees, how you're going to put your elbows. Do you want to do it supinated? Do you want to do it pronated? Do you want how much distance between the hands? What type of handle? But When you find the right one, you'll know it. Right? It's like a partner in life. Once you find the right one, you know it's the right one, and you can stick with them for the rest of your life. This is the same one. It's going to take some workouts on your part, some logistical nightmare is going to occur, but once you find the one version that you like, you will never go back to this. This will exit your head, just like all of your previous exes exit your head once you found your true love. So this is mythical. Of course, your true love must be a mythical creature. Then we are going to discuss the dumbbell kickbacks, and I'm going slowly because it's late and I am tired. So the dumbbell kickbacks is garbage, and you already knew it because everyone on YouTube Fitness and Instagram tells you it's garbage, even people who themselves are garbage. This is bad. There's no justification for doing that movement. Why would you do that movement? You're in an unbalanced position, one arm at a time, and on top of that, most of what you get from this movement is the flex at the top. Even that is not really the case because you have to balance the dumbbell with your shoulder. So people will say, well, I get a good squeeze at the top. Not really, because you cannot maintain the squeeze. Or if you maintain the squeeze, you use baby weight, so you don't get as much stimulus as you would think. The position on the dumbbell is not comfortable. It's horrible. All right, whoever invented this is going to hell, I think. He's going to fitness hell because this is garbage. And again, this is a noob trap. It's like the bench dips. I see so many noobs do that. Why? Because you feel your triceps at the top. Well, there are much better ways to feel your triceps at the top. Stay away from that as much as possible. But if you tell me that you really like the motion for some reason, please do them with cables, because kickbacks with cables are actually quite decent, because now you have something that actually makes sense with the way the tricep works, but also with the strength curve and the tension. The cable provides tension all throughout the movement and not just at the top, so you don't have to rebound like an asshole like with a dumbbell kickback, and you can actually squeeze at the top because the dumbbell is not going to bring, the cable is not going to bring you back down like a cable, like a dumbbell would. So always prioritize cables when it comes to movements like this, please. And we're going to continue in the tradition of horrible movements with what is called the Tate press. The Tate press is also Toothpick-tier. GM press was invented by a man whose name I forgot. I think it was GM Blackley. I cannot pronounce his name. Great powerlifter, huge arms. And he made a compound movement, as powerlifters tend to do, that also had a great stimulus for the tricep.
And if you look at the Tate press, it's supposed to serve a similar function. It's a form of pressing variation with a lot of elbow flexion that is supposed to recruit the tricep. If you look at the name, it makes a lot of sense. Dave Tate is also a stupendous powerlifter. And yet, I believe that this movement is not as good as the GM press, not even close. Why? Well, because you also have sources that show that a man like Jim Bradford, who was an Olympic weightlifter, was using the Tate press to strengthen his shoulders. He was not using that to make the triceps stronger. He was actually using it as an accessory for the clean and press. That says a lot about what the movement is actually working. He was using that because he felt that it gave constant shoulder tension throughout the movement. And of course it does. Look at the position of the shoulder. It's a form of press. But the issue is that it also is going to mean that you're going to get less triceps stimulus because the tricep is never going to be the limiting factor, whereas in the GM press, it always will be. And I'm certain that someone like Dave Tate again was able to build his bench off of it. But if your goal is pure hypertrophy, it's simply not going to serve the goal that it's supposed to serve.
And therefore, what he came up with is an horrible motion, because it's like if you took everything wrong with a press and everything wrong with an extension of the tricep, and you combine them, you end up with a Tate press. So now you have a movement that is limited in terms of range of motion because you run into your own chest. It's very uncomfortable to grab. Good luck grabbing the hundreds and being like this. It's horrible for the wrist and for the forearms.
On top of that, your shoulders are entirely rotated, so there's no really a pressing motion because you're not actually pressing anything, you're just doing this. At the top of the movement, all of the stress of the dumbbell is going to rest directly on your tendons, so it's horrible, it's going to give you tendonitis. This is a tendonitis speed run. If you want to get golfer's elbow as fast as possible, please do that exercise, it's going to work perfectly well. But if you want big triceps, just stay away from this. It makes no sense. It's everything wrong in a tricep exercise combined in one. Bad stretch, bad position of the shoulder, uncomfortable and dangerous for the wrist, horrible. Then we have the dumbbell skull crushers. This one I think is A tier. Because as opposed to the easy bar variation, one, you can go much deeper, unless you're an idiot like the guy in the thing. I don't know if you can see the guy, he's going like this. So he's running the dumbbell straight into his eye. Great idea, dude. No, you let it go next to your head. That's the point. The issue with the squat ratio is that you're limited here. Here you can go much deeper because the dumbbells go past your head. So it's a better movement, I think, than the easy bar squat crusher. Lesser chance of tendonitis, easier to manipulate the angle of the elbow and the shoulder because it's a dumbbell. So it's a better alternative altogether. And after this, we have a lift that is quite trendy nowadays, especially on Instagram, and that is the cross body extension. So some people call it the cross body cable extension, whatever. You are of course going to do it with a cable stack. And you know, I'm tempted to put it low just to spite all of the biomechanics gurus that actually like to prop out this lift as the best tricep movement, but I'm not that petty. So I'm still going to place it in Mythical-tier. It's not the best tricep movement, but it's a good tricep movement. The thing with this movement is that it does work all three heads of the tricep. It is extremely friendly on the elbows. You can allow some shoulder motion to maximally recruit the long head. The one thing I would say is don't be one of those guys that grabs the cable directly with no attachments. I don't know why people do that. They grab le mousqueton, the thing that you clip onto attachments. Why? Grab a rope. Grab something you can actually grab. Don't let this become uncomfortable in your hand. It makes no sense. You can actually move some decent weight on this. The one problem is that you're going to be the asshole that takes two cable stacks for one movement. But if you're nice enough and you let other bros walk in, there should be no problem. So this ranks very high as well. After this, we have the floor triceps extension that is going to find a home in the mediocre tier for reasons I explained previously. Why would you limit yourself artificially with the floor? The issue with that movement is that the dumbbell will run into the floor naturally. So what ends up happening is that you have to keep your shoulders very high in a pressing position, meaning your elbows are pointing towards the ceiling when you're at the bottom of the movement. Risk of tendonitis, and on top of that, you don't get as good of a stretch as you could. So the long head of the tricep doesn't get as much work as it could actually get. I have seen, however, powerlifters use that movement and actually swear by it. So this could be a good accessory for someone who wants to work pressing strength in priority. But if your goal is hypertrophy, there are so many better options that you can do with dumbbells for the tricep development that this one shouldn't even be in your list. Now we're going to talk about the triceps dips. And this is a variety of dips that you're supposed to do with a very vertical torso. It's a little bit tricky to pull off, especially if you've never tried before. I will make sure that I include some form videos to make sure that you guys don't fuck up, because if you do triceps dips the way you are supposed to do them, but with the mindset of a dip, you're going to hurt your shoulders. So be extremely careful. But to me, the triceps dip is decent. It's an okay movement for the tricep. It's better than the dips because you're going to only do the top portion of the movement, so it's going to recruit more of the tricep, less taxing on the shoulder and the chest, so the limiting factor can become the tricep. It's an actually okay movement, and I actually do them myself. I recommend not doing them weighted. I recommend staying with body weight, because this is a movement that if you go too deep into a range of motion that you're not supposed to enter, it could actually go very, very poorly for you. Next up is the single arm dumbbell extension behind the head. And it's an A-tier exercise. You can do it with a rope if you want, but there are some issues that prevent me from putting in Mythical-tier. For example, the fact that, again, you're grabbing one dumbbell at a time, it can be uncomfortable. 2, it's very easy to get tendonitis and obvious injuries from this. And 3, even if you use a rope, meaning you take a rope and you attach dumbbells from it, it's going to be very unbalanced. It's going to dangle all over the place. I like the movement, but you're not going to be able to use heavy weight from it. Even if you do it sitting, you have to make the dumbbell run behind your head. Feels good because you get a good stretch in that position, but it also means that you are potentially going to run into your own head, so you're going to have to do it way behind the body like this. It's not the easiest to set up, and therefore it's best replaced by a cable movement. And in this case, if you want to do that same exact motion with a cable stack, it's mythical. So imagine that there is another one here where you are with a rope and it's Mythical-tier. I'm not saying that to discourage you guys from using free weights, because you could look at this and tell me, well, NH, all of the top exercises are Mythical-tier. Well, it's because we're talking about triceps here. The cable stack is perfectly aligned with the way the triceps function. But the issue with the cable stack is that while you get a good stimulus and not a lot of fatigue for the tendon, you also get less overall stimulus, in which case you should actually take a look at all of these movements here with free weights that could give you that stimulus. On top of that, it's going to be very tough to just stick to cables for the rest of your life because they're boring and you can still get some obvious injuries. So it's best to actually mix the two. Look at Mythical-tier and Excellent-tier and pick from these two and you should be all good. After this, we have the preacher machine triceps extensions. And outside of what I just prescribed, this one you should absolutely avoid because it's mediocre. Usually you see people who market curl machines who also somehow try to tell you it's also a tricep machine. So instead of doing this, you're going to reverse it and you're going to do this. Just don't do it. It's just not worth it. There are so many better alternatives. Any amount of compound movements that you're going to do with a barbell will be better than this for tricep development. And this also goes for the assisted dips machine and the dip machine. I don't know if you've ever seen a dip machine. They're very popular with noobs and boomers. Boomers love that machine, I think. It's when you sit and you just press and there's like a levy behind you and you just press the weight up. Not that good. You're doing like a reverse vertical press. So you're not getting as much tricep as you actually think. It's more of a shoulder workout in reality. It's just bad. It's a compound movement that doesn't really manage to actually do what it set out to do, which is to develop the tricep. So again, stay away from that. Imagine that the machine for tricep extensions, the assisted dip machine, and the fake dip machine are all placed in Mythical-tier. Some people like assisted dips because they like the fact that it deloads their own body weight so they can just focus on tricep. You won't be able to use that as your main exercise. It will be a finisher. So it still ends up being fairly mediocre at the end of the day. And talking about something that is mediocre, we also have the floor press. So floor press, another favorite of powerlifters or people who love training with barbells and dumbbells, who love big compounds. I mean, it has carryover to the bench, don't get me wrong, but just because you cut down the range of motion and the portion at the bottom that would tax the shoulders and the chest more does not mean that the tricep is going to magically get recruited more. It just means that you're going to be able to work more on your lockout. But keep in mind that your lockout is not going to grow your tricep as much as you think. Because if it did, we'd just all do floor presses and board presses and we'd have massive triceps. It works the tricep. Westside has proven it. But you're not from Westside, you're not a powerlifter. There are better alternatives out there. This is still going to be okay if you have a connection with the lift or if you are a bench bro, but for the most part, you should stay away from floor presses for tricep development, also because they don't work the long head of the tricep at all. Then we have my favorite tricep movement of all time, the lying tricep extension. When I do skull crushers, I'm actually doing that exercise. It's one when you allow the shoulder to go maximally behind the body and you do the movement here. So the bar never actually goes close to your face. It goes from behind your head to actually in perfect line with your body. This is much better than skull crushers. There's actually no comparison. This is God tier. And it's also God tier if you use dumbbells for it. So if you've never tried it and you're a skull crusher bro, please try it like this. You will never go back to regular skull crushers ever. Please don't cheat either, okay? The goal is not to involve the shoulder joint. We're not doing a pullover. You allow the shoulder to go maximally into flexion, then you do the movement in that position. It's going to require some mobility, but this is incredible, and this is the only free weight exercise that is going to find its way into the Mythical-tier. Then we have band pushdowns that are simply mediocre. You're essentially doing pushdowns with a single arm or double arm, but with bands instead of with a cable. The reason why it's mediocre is because it's hard to load. It's hard to know how much weight you're using, so it's tough to possibly overload. But it is good tier for prevention of tendonitis. If you have tendonitis, this is the cure. High rep, high volume, high frequency, band triceps pushdowns. Give it a try. But since we're talking about hypertrophy in this tier list, I cannot rank it any higher than that. Then there is the single arm pushdown that is the exact same, but is going to be mythical. Why? You can load it, much more comfortable. You can use whatever handle that you prefer. It's time tested, guys. This is the type of movement that if you do year in, year out, and you actually progress on, your triceps will grow. I used to know a bro who was a pure upper body bro, and at the end of every single session, he would do 100 reps of this. He had the biggest triceps I've ever seen in my life. Why? He progressively overloaded on that movement with high volume and high frequency for 5 years. and the results showed. So absolutely do that movement. Just because it's old, just because it's been done in the past, doesn't mean that it's bad. It's a great complement also to if you do V-bar pushdowns or rope pushdowns. You can never go bad with isolation for the tricep, and the extension with the cable is the best way to isolate the tricep. And then I end with a little troll of mine with the bench press that is going to land directly in Toothpick-tier. If you do a regular bench press thinking you're going to get huge arms from it, tough luck, you won't, because it's not a tricep movement. It's a chest and shoulder builder. The tricep serve minimally in the movement and are never the limiting factor ever. If you can't lock out a bench press, it's not because you have weak triceps, it's because the velocity of the chest is poor. This is the truth. This is not a movement adapted to training your tricep. All of the things above are much better. And that is going to conclude this video. So in the same logic, and for the same reason that bench is not a good exercise, look at the ones I placed in Mythical-tier and look at the exercises in Excellent-tier. This is your bread and butter. For triceps, this is what you want to pick. After that, if you want a movement for tricep and shoulders and chest, close grip bench, football bar bench, all of these in decent tier are also valid options. A dip is also going to be a valid option. But after that, look at all of the exercises that I placed that only work the tricep
or think they only work the tricep, like the Tate press, like this standing easy bar, extension behind the head. These are bad options because everything they're trying to work, they work it poorly. They're not doing a proper job. If we're doing a chest tier list, the bench press will never be there. But because we're talking triceps, it has to lay here. So when you select your movement, make sure it's going to be tendonitis proof, make sure it's going to be comfortable, that you're going to be able to progress with it for a very long time, and that it has carryover, that it connects with other movements to give a full development of the three heads of the tricep. That is how I thought about this tier list, and it's how I hope you guys are going to think about it as well by looking at this ranking right here. And I'm going to leave you with that. I don't know when the next tier list is going to actually happen. I'm going to give some time from this one to the next one, but as I promised, the next one will be the lats because it was the second most popular muscle group in my pool, and therefore I will make sure that all of the back enthusiasts on this channel get what they deserve. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.